is taking note.
Okay, you're listening to Kim In-rong. He's the North Korean deputy ambassador. He's talking at the UN in New York. Extremely aggressive language, and I just want to bring in Foreign Affairs writer Tim Marshall. Tim, what did you make of what he was saying? Gangster-like behaviour, unjust and unproportionate. The US is disturbing global peace. What did you make of it?
It's nothing you wouldn't see on the 10 o'clock news on DPRK television. DPRK being the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, to give it its official name, because he can't say North Korea because that would accept the division of the two Koreas. So they say their official name, DPRK. No, there was nothing in there I thought of a headline other than the word gangster. But right at the end, I was figuring out why this bashing of the UN, and I think it's probably preempting what may happen at the UN. The Chinese are losing patience. So consequently, there is a possibility, and that is all, that the Chinese will actually vote with the Americans at the Security Council, whereas normally they would veto anything against the DPRK. I think they may be preparing the ground for saying what a terrible institution the United Nations is in case the UN turns against them. But I didn't see any announcement that sort of language you mentioned about gangsters, threatening stability, war may break out. As I said, it's pretty much routine on the news every night.
OK, Tim, thanks a lot. Let's return to that referendum in Turkey, where the decision to give President Recep Erdogan new sweeping powers has been described as the most important reform in the country's history. He narrowly won the vote, but the country's opposition have called for the result to be cancelled after citing voting irregularities. Well, let's take a look at what happens from now. Well, the 18 constitutional changes will come into effect after the next election scheduled for November 2019. The president will have a 5-year tenure for a maximum of 2 terms, meaning he could have these powers right up until 2029. The parliamentary system will be replaced with a presidential one, meaning the job of prime minister, currently held by Binali Yildirim, will be completely scrapped, similar to how the French system works. This will hand sweeping executive powers to the president, including the ability to directly appoint public officials, including ministers, and dissolve parliament, and the power to intervene in the judiciary, meaning he could choose senior judges. Plus, Mr. Erdogan will be able to decide whether or not to impose a state of emergency. So what next? Well, the president has already said the country could hold a referendum on bringing back the death penalty, which would almost definitely end Turkey's chances of accession to the EU. Speaking this afternoon, international observers keeping an eye on the referendum have given their update on how it was undertaken.
The 16 April constitutional referendum took place on an unlevel playing field, and the two sides of the campaign did not have equal opportunities. Voters were not provided with impartial information about key aspects of the reform.
We also noted a significant imbalance in the campaign, due, among other things, to the active involvement of the President, several leading national officials and many local public officials in the Yes campaign. Our team observed the misuse of administrative resources.
Well, Foreign Affairs writer Tim Marshall joins us. Thanks a lot for joining us. Tim, we're talking North Korea, now we're talking Turkey. So, President Erdogan's yes vote.
Yes.
51% of the vote, a very narrow margin. Do you think that Erdogan himself was quite surprised by that?
Well, all the polls said it was going to be close. And do you remember the row they had with the Dutch just during the Dutch election, where Turkish expatriates were holding rallies in the Netherlands, and they were sending people over to these rallies? That's because they knew it was going to be close. And so the government wanted to, the Turkish government wanted to persuade the expats to vote for yes, because they knew that could swing it. And it was just a 3% or 2% difference. So they knew it was going to be close. I think they would have been very surprised if they'd lost, but I don't think they're surprised that they've won, albeit by a narrow margin.
He came out today. He was calling for a unified Turkey.
Yes.
Do you think he's going to be able to do that? I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's a completely polarised country, isn't it?
I don't think you can. I mean, look, it's very, very different to Brexit, but the Brexit vote being by 4 points has allowed both sides to carry on arguing with each other. If this had been a massive, overwhelming mandate for these very, very serious changes, giving powers which, if used and abused, and I say if abused, are basically dictatorial. So they've gone down that route, but narrowly, and therefore the arguments are going to continue. And when you look at the pattern of voting as well, you see other divisions. I mean, there's the clear yes-no division. Then there's a division between urban and rural. Ankara, Istanbul, Izmir all voted no, thank you very much. When you look at the pattern of the Kurds, most of them voted no, thank you very much. So you have these fissures in Turkish society, which a narrow vote will only make worse. So I think that's the most important meaning of this referendum. It is about what happens inside Turkey. Now, obviously, there's a knock-on effect. I don't see it changing that much foreign relations. The trajectory was already set. They're not joining the EU, with or without this referendum, with or without, well, without the death penalty. It's just not on the cards. It's all hot air. So that trajectory will carry on with a difficult relationship to do with the migration crisis. If you look southeast, which is equally important for Turkey, they will continue their trajectory of trying to influence the Middle East all the way down to the former Ottoman Empire of Kirkuk, Mosul, the Turkmen areas of Syria. That's where they were 100 years ago. That's where they're heading back. And that's not going to change. So the fundamental change is within Turkish society, and the fact it's going to be extremely troubled for years to come.
Let's look at these powers, because at the moment, on paper, his presidency is ceremonial, isn't it? And yet
Yeah.
we've seen, just an example after that attempted coup, 100,000 people sacked, 50,000 people jailed. So if he has greater powers, where do you think we're going?
Well, it's more journalists locked up than in any other country per capita. What happened? He's been in power for 15 years. He used to be the Prime Minister. He then switched it to the presidency. And by sheer force of personality, and he has quite a personality, working class lad, ex-professional footballer, come through the ranks from a working class district of Istanbul, beloved by at least half the country. Great personality. So by sheer force of personality, he took the powers from the Prime Minister, who let him do it. And what the President said happens. But now he's going to enshrine that in law after this referendum. So once you've got rid of a Prime Minister, you are the direct ruler. Consequently, Parliament is massively weakened. And you can do the following, and Turkey is going to be troubled for a few years. So there may be a thing after 2019 where he says, right, I'm declaring another state of emergency. Right, I am dissolving Parliament. Right, I am ruling by decree on various issues. And I will renew the state of emergency. And at that point, he's not a dictator. He has gone through the ballot box. But at that point, you're a sort of democratic dictator.
OK, Tim, we could talk about this for hours, but
Indeed.
we do have time constraints. Thank you so much for coming in.